Okay, great. So, just a few more. Okay, great. So I think we had a very interesting discussion in the lecture before this, and it talked about the cryptography, it talked about the PKI, it talked about the various layers at which security and encryption is handled, uh, which is important to understand before we can go into the deep details. So I'd like to thank the previous speaker for setting the context. Now, there are two things that we have to understand. One is the protocol suite, which is the IPsec. The other is the application of this protocol suite to achieve some end, right? So let me just give you a background on what VPN is, and then probably I will switch back onto this slide, which talks about the protocol. So let me end the show and jump back to this slide here. Okay, so is it visible?
Yes, sir. Please carry on.
Okay, so when you say VPN, right, it stands for a virtual private network. Now we have to understand, first of all, why do we need VPN and what is actually VPN? So there it comprises of three words: virtual private network. So let's start from the back, which is network. When we say network, that means connectivity, that means a roadway, a path where you can access resources which are in some private environment, right? The second word is private. And then the third word is virtual. So to sum it up, to sum up all the three words, it is kind of a connectivity from somewhere on the public internet to a resource which is on the private secured network, and you have to allow to access these resources over the internet. So this term has taken a lot of significance, especially in view of work from home and work from anywhere environments, due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the work from anywhere kind of requirement for the users. So what happens is, why do we need VPN is the question, right? We need VPN because there are these resources which we have here, our websites, our critical servers, our data, which is stored in the data center. Now the data center, we have to understand, is some kind of a protected vault, right? It is a safe house, it's secure, the data is secure, but we need the data to work for us. For that, we need to access the data. So until and unless we are able to access the data at a location where it is used, the data is useless. So you put something very important in a vault and you forget it and throw the keys away, that is as good as it's not there, because you're not able to use it, right? So what do we need to do is, we need to actually be able to use that data, right? In order to use that data, we have to connect to that particular server, that resource which is put in a safe vault kind of a data center. Now the problem that comes along with exposing your vault is all kinds of attacks, right? Whenever you have your services which are exposed to the public, exposed to the internet, then all sorts of people, good, bad, ugly, they all try to explore, some with good intentions, some with malintentions, but still your data and your secure data, which was there in the vault till yesterday, is exposed, right? So there is where VPN comes into picture. It creates a tunnel, it creates a pipe between the users which is there in the bad ugly world, and then between the data which is in your safe secured data vault, right? So VPN, to analyze, the analogy that makes me understand VPN very clearly is the pipeline system or the gas pipeline system. In the water pipeline system, there were overhead tanks. Few years back, I don't see that happening these days, but few years back in our hometowns, old cities, you had overhead tanks, right? So we can imagine them to be the data centers, the secure vaults. And then our houses were where we needed water for consumption, the potable water we used to drink, wash, all sorts of stuff. So that water had to be carried from that vault, which is the overhead water tank in the locality, to our home, right? But the challenge was, from that vault or the overhead tank to the house, there were a lot of open world. There were roads, there were drains, there were animals, there were people, vehicle, everything. So you cannot simply allow that water in an open channel to flow into your house, because then it will get contaminated, it will get stolen, it will get leaked out. there are so many problems that can happen. So what did we do as a solution? We lay a physical pipeline around the locality connected to the overhead water tank. Now what happens is the water flows from that overhead tank into the secure pipelines to our homes where we can use it. And a few years back, I remember we used to drink the same water without any fear, because the water was assumed to be, and most of the time it was clean and potable, right? So that was actually a physical network, physical private network, which used to carry water safely. Now, in an introvert world where the domain is probably the complete globe, it is practically impossible to lay pipes, and in our case for data, lay wires. So let us say you have an office in Kanyakumari and the data center, let us say in Shimla. So you cannot lay a physical wire from Kanyakumari to Shimla to access the secure resources, right? And it is similar for all of it. Let us say one of our embassies has a office in Washington, so you have to lay an undersea dedicated cable from Washington to let us say a data center in Delhi to secure that data which is flowing on the internet, on the open internet, right? Or you have to have a dedicated channel. So this concept of virtual comes in, where we use the existing public infrastructure, right? Where there is nothing which is dedicated, there is nothing which is created every time. You don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. There is a set network of connectivity through fibers, under cables, and ISP tiers and their data centers, their network centers, and then it reaches us. So the challenge was to create a virtual tunnel or virtual tunneling kind of stuff on that public infrastructure, so that they are able to access the data securely from wherever it is hosted. It is hosted in Delhi, Hyderabad, Bangalore, Chennai, or even Singapore, or wherever it is, right? So the virtual private networks, it's kinds of create a pipeline, virtual pipeline, by of course the use of cryptography, where the data is scrambled. As you have seen in the previous sessions, the data is scrambled and it is sent across to people, you know where they can unscramble it and read it. Anybody in between cannot actually see that data. So that is what happens. I have a question from Mr. Rajak. He says nowadays people use VPN to bypass firewalls of the organization, access content on the internet. Is that the desired? No, that is not the desired. I mean, from our context, from an enterprise context, from government's context, that is not a desired. But yes, of course, if you're living in a country, I would not name those countries, but there are oppressive countries in the world which do not allow the users to access even simple internet resources. So because the internet is not controlled, it is open, and anybody can open a website and anybody can host and post anything that may be or may not be good for a particular set of users in a particular area, location, geography, or a country. So then this is used to bypass censorship, right? But again, it is a tool. So as with any tool, as with a knife, you can cut a throat or a vegetable. So VPN is a tool. You can use VPN to protect your own data. You can use VPN to bypass censorship, which is illegitimate and which is against human rights. Or you can use VPN to exfiltrate data from your organization, which is actually illegal and undesirable. So VPN per se is a tool which, if used correctly, again is very useful, but it can, of course, like any other tool, be misused, right? So if you are accessing VPN from your organization to exfiltrate data, to do something which your organizational policy does not allow, then you are using the tool in the wrong way, like you're using a knife to cut a throat, or an arm. Whereas if you're using this VPN to bypass country censorship, which is against human rights, which is against natural justice, then probably it may be justified at a point of time, right? But typically, how we as government and as enterprise use VPN is to allow our users sitting in their homes, sitting on their airports, sitting at their remote offices, to access the secure enterprise and government data from their location securely. So primarily, that is where we use VPN. I hope that answers. You can always send a follow-up question if you want. Right. So all this is relevant to. Okay. So since we have get into VPN, I'll just take a couple of more slides to make you understand the landscape of VPN. we'll have classification, architecture, connection process, and then once you understand VPN, we will go into the IPsec protocol. Then you'll be able to appreciate that whatever we are doing in VPN, we are able to do because of this. One of this is IPsec protocol, right? So VPN can be based on connectivity. So typically we'll have a remote access VPN. Now the remote access VPN, the concept is one side is a server, the other side is a human client, right? That human client is important. Whereas the other is site-to-site VPN, with which both sides are servers which want to sync data. Let us say you have one data center in office A, which is in, let's say, Delhi. The other data center is in office B, which is in Bangalore. And the two servers have to sync data, right? One has copy from the north, the other has the copy from the south. But you want them to share data so that you have a complete picture, or even for redundancy. So one way is you open your IPs on the internet and you allow them to share data over internet, which again has the problems that we have seen in the previous slide. So what we create is a site-to-site VPN. Here, no human intervention is expected or required. Whereas in remote access VPN, one thing is very clear is one side will be a human, which will be accessing the data on the other side, which will be on the server, right? And again, remote access VPN is divided into two types, which is web-based VPN, the other is client or IP-based VPN. Now web-based VPN, it also has a client, but the browser behaves as a client, right? Your web browser, be it any Firefox, Chrome, or Safari, IE, Edge, whatever it is, that particular browser behaves as a client. When I say behaves as a client, is it does the encryption for the outgoing packet and decryption for the incoming data that is got back from the server, right? But the limitation is that it can only do this encryption decryption for web applications, that is applications running on HTTP, applications which are running on web browser. The second type is a client based VPN, where the client is installed on the machine and it can tunnel anything that is happening on the machine. So suppose you have a client which you want to connect through SSH, as you had seen in the last lecture, or you want to do a DB connection on the server. That won't be happening through web, because it is not running on an HTTP protocol. It is running on an SSH protocol, or some kind of a database protocol, MS SQL, Oracle, Postgres, whatever it is, right? So then in that case, the complete contents that are leaving the network interface card of your device has to be encrypted. That cannot be done by the browser, because browser only understands HTTP traffic. In that case, we would need client based VPN, or IP based VPN. The third case is again the site to site, which is when you have two servers, or two machines which have to sync data without manual or human intervention. In that case, there will be firewalls or routers or dedicated VPN devices at both ends. They will handshake and establish the encryption decryption modalities and protocols and parameters, and then devices sitting behind these two firewalls or secure gateways will communicate like they are communicating on a secure LAN, but the firewall or the security devices will in turn do the encryption and decryption. So classification is based on connectivity. We have web VPN, client VPN, as well as site-to-site VPN. And then based on protocol, the two major protocols is, one is IPsec, the other is SSL. We also have a few more newer protocols. One of them is OpenVPN. Now there is another protocol which is in vogue these days, which still a lot of work is happening, is WireGuard. So what these guys, IPsec was the foremost, one of the first, IP level security protocols, and it was heavily used in VPN, but it had its complications, as we will see in the subsequent slides, that it is a little difficult to configure, difficult to manage, because it's a lot of parameters, although it is very secure and it is not known to be breached at a protocol structure or architecture level. So it's very safe, but it requires a lot of effort. So to ease out those efforts, newer protocols like SSL, newer protocols like WireGuard have come in, which reduce the efforts that are required for establishing VPN, right? So that's what I've just discussed, is a client server architecture. You will have to have a VPN server, secure gateway, or whatever you want to call it, firewall. And then at the client side, you can have a browser, you can have any client, whether it's AnyConnect or a Microsoft LTTP Connect, or any other client which can actually do the handshake with the server and do the encryption decryption, right? And the typical connection process, uh, although it is very on the layman side, but still just run through it simply, is client requests for a connection to the server. The server's domain is resolved, right? Then the server presents its certificate to the client, like a typical, authentication situation where the client has to trust the certificate before it can establish a tunnel, or it can establish a VPN connection, just to be sure that it is trying to connect to connection to the right. I mean, the flip side of it is, suppose you are connecting to a server which you're not aware of, and that is placed by the attacker strategically. So whenever you connect, it connects to the attacker server, and then you try to open your email or your workflow or whatever it is, that is being shared by the attacker. So whenever you enter your actual credentials, it is phished from that server, and then your connection is resolved. So to avoid these kind of situations, man in the middle and phishing attacks, the server has to present the certificate, the client has to verify. Now all this happens automatically. When you say my URL is, let us say, secureconnect.nic.in, right? So the certificate should also be for Secure Connect, and has to be presentable certificate. So all this, what I'm telling you, happens at the back end. The user does not have to worry about it, but that is what happened behind the curtain. Then the client accepts the certificate, and then the server requests client certificate, right, for strong authentication or two-factor authentication. The same certificate that the gentleman before me was talking about, the PKI, private public key digital signature certificate. So you present your certificate to establish that who are you, and you are authorized to connect VPN. Then your certificate is verified, your private key signs up nonce, and it sends to the server. That is verified, and once this verification process completes, the client trusts the server trusts the client. And now the basic authentication is, the two will decide upon the parameters on which the tunnel or the encryption is going to be established, right? Those are called security associations or security parameters, which are negotiated, right? And once these are negotiated, the server provides the IP address to the client, a private IP address, so that you don't have to worry about the public devices in between. So you get a separate private IP address, right? And that private IP address is put in another header, right? You will see it. So this is what typically happens in a IPsec. So let's just go to the main slide here, right? So all this communication and all of this happens by the use of an important protocol suite, which is called IPsec. When I say protocol suite, IPsec is not an individual, is not a single protocol. IPsec is a set of protocols which it has ESP, it has EH, it has ICKMP, it has IKE, IK1, IK2. It has so many other protocols which give you all the different functionalities that are needed to negotiate this IPsec, right? So am I making sense? Any questions that you have? You just feel free to fire it, right?
There is one question that has come on chat. You may kindly see.
Yeah, that I've already taken. It is from Mr. Rajak, or is there any other question?
Yeah. The questions are coming on chat only, so you kindly have a look at that.
Unfortunately, I can see only one question from Mr. Saldesh Rajak. If you're able to see any other question, just let me know.
Okay, our team will pass on if there is any question.
Yeah, because I am seeing in my chat window, I am able to see only one question from Mr. Rajak to all panelists. So just feel free, right? If you have a question, just push in it prompts and then. Okay, so that was about VPN. Let us go into the problems in a more formal way. The internet today is comprised of public, and public, when you say, it's not public of a country, it's not public of a region, it's the public of the world, right? The internet is a place without boundaries. The internet is a place without any restrictions, right? Then it is not trustable, and then you have IP networks, and today anybody can set up their own IP network. They can connect to any ISP, do any service. So it is all the wild west kind of a situation in internet. So that the issue is security as well as trust. Now why is this a problem? Because the internet, which was created part of the DARPA project, uh, at that time hardly if very few people used internet, and it was used for strictly academic and military purposes, and they had their separate networks. People were not allowed, computers were not common. So the protocols created at that time, especially the IP protocol, was devoid of any security, because there was no requirement of security. So the protocol itself did not have any inherent security mechanism. But as then when the use increased, a lot of people started hopping onto the internet. Money came in, sensitive information started pouring on internet. People with malintentions also started using it for their own purposes. Then is when the need for securing the data and different threats like integrity, spoofing, replay, loss of privacy, all this came into picture. But the IP protocol was already established, was already running. I'm talking about v4, IPv4, which was already established, already running. So we could not do anything. So then is when IP security came into picture, IPsec. Its purpose was not only VPN, there was multiple use cases, but ultimately, it was used widely for VPN. But IPsec as a word, it talks about securing the IP protocol, which was created time when security was not a concern at all. Right. So typical threats is, we are all aware of this: data integrity. Like I'm sending something to the other person, and an attacker in the middle changes it, and the receiver gets something which is totally not what it was intended for him. Right. Then there is identity spoofing, which means that I am saying something, but I'm saying not as me, but I'm saying as somebody else. Let's say I'm saying something as Amitabh Bachchan, right? So people will, if not properly authenticated, think that Amitabh Bachchan is saying things, right? Which is again theft of identity and loss of reputation, and it can be misused in a lot of different ways. Then there can be replay attacks, where unauthorized data can be transmitted without, let us say I have to send something, a confidential letter, I send it to you, and then I leak it to other people, right? Myself. And then I say that I haven't done it, right? So replaying the same message, same without any security or any uh, mechanism to prevent that. And then of course, loss of data, loss of confidentiality, loss of privacy is one of the threats. So typically IPsec came into picture to protect users using IP protocols from these typical. Now before we get into IPsec, we have to understand the TCP IP model. So OSL on the left is the OSI reference model. So it's basically a theoretical model which unfortunately could not get rolled out into the actual production world. On the right is the TCP IP model, which was actually used in the machines, the servers, the switches and routers that we have, right? So it starts from the below physical, logical, network, transport session, and application layers, right? So what happens is each layer has a different purpose, right? Somebody creates the data, the other presents it, the third session, the third one is securing it, transport, then somebody is labeling it, addressing it, and actually converting it from this logical to the signals on the wire, right? Now what happens is the data is created at the application layer. This is a very good, this is the original message. Now when it moves to the second layer, which is the transport layer, a header is attached, right? So application creates data, and then a header is attached. It can be TCP, UDP, and then it becomes data for the next layer, which is the IP layer. Now another header is attached, right? So the original, this data 2 here is actually header 3 plus data 3, right? And another 2 is attached. Similarly, for the next data link layer, header 2 and data 2 is data 1. Another header is attached, right? This particular thing that happens on the data link layer actually forms a packet which is sent by, let us say, A to somebody B, right? And the data link layer at the physical layer, it only transmits that packet in form of signals, right? Whenever the packet is received by the host, it sees the big header 1, data 1. What it does, it removes the header and then passes the data to the upper layer, which is the IP layer, which again reads the data, removes the header, passes it on to the third layer, and similarly the original message is passed on to the application layer, right? The application can be your HTTP application, which gets displayed on the browser. It can be a SSH, where you can get a command prompt or a prompt for that server, or it can be a database application. So it can be any application layer protocol, right? Now, so the major layers that we see were data, network, transport, and application, right? So an application layer, you have SSH, you have Kerberos, PHP, HTTP, so many other protocols. Transport layer, as it was talked in the previous session, was TLS, transport layer security, which is nothing but an alternate for SSL. So you can call it SSL or you can call it TLS. It's all management. On the field, it is the same thing, TLS or SSL. And then at the network layer comes the IP security or IPsec, right? And then at the hard data link layer, it's hardware encryption. Again, hardware encryption is most preferred, but it is difficult because you have to be physically present, and on every hop you have to either encrypt it or and decrypt it. So at hop level you have to have physical encryptors and decryptors. So that is again a difficult thing to do in a normal internet. So we begin from IP, and it is recommended, always recommended, to use a mix of all these. So if you're doing IPsec, then you should also do SSL over that or PGP, so that if even if one of your components is weak or compromised, you have another layer to protect your data. So it just makes it a little difficult. So it is about level. So when you see a lock, the lock, it can be a 3-lever lock, it can be a 7-lever lock, it can be a 8-lever lock, and none of this means that it cannot be broken. What it means is you need a bigger hammer. So the same logic applies here, right? So application, it can be PGP, Kerberos, SSH. So then it has to be implemented at the application side. So the challenge here, advantage is that you don't have to change the infrastructure below, the operating system, the network protocol stack. Nothing has to be changed. What you need to do is only customize the application. But the difficulty here is that for every application you have to devise some kind of a security inbuilt. So you create a new application, new protocol, you have to again secure it, right? Transport level is again specific to the transport. And then let's say IPsec. So the advantage is that any application or transport you use, it can be a TCP or a UDP, it can be at the application level, a mail, a PGP, a IMAP, everything that gets encrypted, right? And you don't have to do security on a per application, per protocol, application level, protocol level. That's the disadvantage, is that you need to have to configure at the OS or the network protocol level, and that requires some manual intervention, some changes, and then you can run any application on top of this. So I mean, none of this is good and bad. It's based upon your requirement. So if you have to run a particular application and you have to secure it, then application level security fit too. If it is a sensitive application, then you have to add another layer of IPsec, as we have discussed earlier, right? And this again, data link is not scalable, new dedicated links, dedicated hardware, so it's a lot of effort, and practically it is not possible to do it from here to Washington. Then this comes the IP security suite, which practically works on IP layer. Achha, to add to this discussion, IP6 already has this security inbuilt in one of its extended headers. So IPsec, you don't know, for IPv6 you do not need IPsec on a separate protocol suite. And the problems of IPv4 are already incorporated in terms of IPv6 extended headers, but unfortunately IPv6 is not that prevalent and not that widely used. So we still use a lot of IPsec over IPv4, right? This is a IFT standard, which is called an RFC. So it is a completely open protocol, and any vendor, any person, any researcher can create a application following the standard that is defined by IFT, which is Indian Engineering Task Force, right? Now the advantages is that it is assures that the traffic is initiated from a point because of authentication, then the data has not been tampered, the data has not been leaked, right? And who can see it. So all these 4 are the advantages of using IPsec, which were the problems with IP, right? So you can be sure that who has sent it, you can be sure that data is not leaked, you can be sure that data is not being compromised until and unless the tunnel is broken. So anywhere the tunnel is attempted to be broken, or trying to do man in the middle, immediately both the endpoints will come to know that there has been an attack on the tunnel, then there has been an attempt to go into the middle, and then they will stop sending the data immediately, and the attacker in the middle will not be able to get any fruitful data or any actual data, right? So that is the advantage of using IPsec. Now there are 2 modes of operation in IPsec. How long can I continue? It is 37 now. So you want me to finish by the previous time, 45, or do I have an extension of, let's say, 10 minutes?
You can continue up to 4:55.
Okay, thank you so much. That is very generous. Spend another 5 minutes here, and then we'll go to PGP and spend another 10,
Okay.
15 minutes there. Okay, so there are two modes of IPsec operations. One is the transport mode and the other is tunnel mode. So you have to understand there's a lot of technology here, but if I'm not going to go into the technology, you have to first understand the hang of it, and then you will anyway understand the technology if you are interested. So it is like somebody is wearing a wheel, some kind of a cloak, some kind of a uh, and he is going from one place to another. So let us say there is something called naqab or burqa or a wheel or a cloak, whatever you want to call it. So let us say I wear that cloak from my house and go to my neighbor's house, right? Then people will come to know that somebody is going from house A to house B, right? But who is it? They will not come to know because that person is inside the cloak, right? That is nothing but the transport mode. Whereas the other is I have a actual tunnel between the two houses, so anybody that goes within that tunnel, the outside world will not know whether anybody is going or who is going, so they will not know both the things. Wherein in the first place you can see somebody wearing a cloak going, but you'll not be able to see what is happening, right? So that is transport mode. If there is a tunnel, then the outside world will not come to know at all whether there is somebody going between the two homes or not, right? So that is the difference between transport and tunnel mode. Now, people may argue that why would we need to tell somebody that somebody is going or some data is going from here to there? We can always tunnel it so that nobody knows that anybody is going. Yes, of course, that is correct, but that depends upon the requirement, right? And if you do the complete tunneling, you will have a new IPsec header. There will be overhead, right? So again, nothing. These are all options. These are all tools. Nothing is good and nothing is bad. Depends upon your requirement. So coming on the technology front, if you look at the original IP header, you have data, you have TCP header, which is at the level 4, and then you have the layer 3 IP header, right? In the transport mode, the data, the TCP header is augmented with the IPsec header here, right? And the third, in the second transport mode packet, you have IPsec header, but the IP header, the original addresses are the same, right? You don't change the address, so the applications will know the originator of the traffic and destination of the traffic in the IP header, but the data is protected, it is encrypted, right? It is similar to somebody is moving with a cloak. You know that somebody is moving with a cloak from house A to house B, but who is there in the cloak you don't know because that is encrypted. Whereas in the tunnel mode, you actually put in the complete, the last picture in the slide, complete packet within the IPsec header, and then you add another header. So now the original sender, original recipient, which is part of the original IP header, are not known to anybody. So they would know only the IP addresses on the new header, which will be of the gateway, secure gateways from one gateway to another gateway, right? So they will not know who behind which applications, which servers behind the gateway are actually trying to communicate, which is like digging a tunnel underneath the road within the two houses, so nobody knows who is going or whether anybody is going also or not. So these are the two modes, transport and tunnel mode, right? Now, again, host to network or network to network, which is remote access, and site to site or LAN to LAN or network to network. One case, there is a client which is sitting on the machine. The other case, it is a security gateway, right? Host to host, you have a client, and host to network, and network to network, you have two security gateways as shown in the diagram, right? Again, it's the same. So the modes of IPsec, which is transport and tunnel, are achieved using the two initial protocols, which are called authentication header and encapsulating security payload, AH and ESP. So these are the two protocols which can encrypt the headers and the data, and can operate within AH, within transport and tunnel modes, but they have a few differences. Let's get onto those. Authentication header provides connection integrity, right? And data authentication and protection against replay, right? Again, all this is English, which you can read once we share the PPT. What it actually means is the AH will encrypt that payload, right? And it does not encrypt the header as in the transport mode. right? Whereas ESP can encrypt both. It can do ESP can do both. It can do transport as well as tunnel. So it can either encrypt, not encrypt the header, or it can also encrypt the header, right? So that depends upon what is your requirement and then which of the two protocols are. This is the basic of IPsec. Do you have any questions here? Okay, network jam. I don't know if that's a question for me. Mr. Paswan, if you can elaborate, is that a question for me? What I'll do is I'll go ahead with PGP, and then probably come back if you have a question which is ready. Right. So now PGP, what is PGP? So one important thing is that PGP is basically good for email security, but good for other purposes also. So is the slide visible?
Sir,
Okay.
you can continue till 350, yeah, 350.
Beg your pardon? Hello? Yeah, so we have a question from Mr. Vap. He says, what is the conclusion? So the conclusion is that the IPv4 protocol was created at a time when security was not a concern. Then we had the explosion of internet and all sorts of people coming in, and then it was a borderless world without any territorial or without any administrative authorities. We had to protect our data which is flowing on internet. That is when
Sir, your
security.
voice is coming very low. Can you just speak a little bit louder?
Yeah, I will just try that. Is it better now?
Yes, sir, yes.
Okay. So, which slide, Mr. Vap, if you can be specific? Okay. So it was a time when IP4 was not secure, so a security IPsec came into picture to secure the IP layer. And then most typical use of that IPsec was VPN, which we use to protect our internal infrastructure, right? And then that is IPsec is not a protocol; it is a protocol suite. It has a lot of protocols which do a lot of number crunching and a lot of negotiation, security parameters, security negotiation, and then you get something like a tunnel, a private tunnel from your home to your offices, which you can buy surety and safety, transmit data, right? And the most common example that we will remember these days is work from home situations within the pandemic lockdown, right? I hope I've answered that, but at the end of the session I'll share my email ID, so in case if any of your questions are not answered, if you have any further follow-up questions, just feel free to write it to me. So is this slide on email security PGP visible? If anybody can please confirm. Okay, thanks, Mr. Raja. Okay, so one of the most important information sharing mechanism today is invariably email, right? You do everything on email. I mean, with Government of India's 2015 policy, an email, official email, of course, is as good as a note sheet, right? The note sheets that you write, the notings, the files that you create, an email is as good as that. So, saying that to emphasize that email and its security has become very, very important, because we share all kinds of communication over email. So that can be official, that can be personal. Now, as with any internet system, any IT system, it has its flaws, which can be misused. It has vulnerabilities, it has implementation issues, which can make the mails vulnerable, and then the attacker can get all the sensitive data that is there in the email. So email security these days have become one of the most important topics, and you must have seen, or you will see in the future discussions, that spear phishing, which is sending malware, sending malicious links over email, has become one of the most potent and one of the most widely used attack vector in today's world. I mean, I am piling onto this because this is something that cannot be emphasized enough. Unsolicited emails, and most of the attacks that are happening these days, if you are interested and you go through the news items, you will see that attack started with a phishing email, which is called spear phishing, which was laced with a malware, or it was sent with a link. That link was hosting some kind of a malware on a website which was unsecure, and then that particular malware got into the machine of the user, and the user's machine got compromised. Once that got compromised, then the attacker installed rats, remote access trojans, and all kinds of other malware, and they could do everything with your machine. So you have anything on the machine, your personal photograph, official documents, any credentials that are stored, everything that could have been taken away once your machine is compromised. So email security has become one of the most important and relevant sections of security these days, right? So as I've already discussed, loss of confidentiality, loss of integrity, loss of data, all those things, repudiation. Somebody sends an email. So right, let us say typically, if you want to send an email, your mail client or your browser, wherever you open an email, if you try to send, it will only allow you to send through your email address from where you have logged in. So it asks you only for a sender address. Nobody ever asks you if you have a single email configured. It doesn't ask you for a receive or sender's address. It always sends you the receiver's address, whom it has to be delivered to, and not who has sent it, right? Because it has been created that way. But imagine I'm an attacker and I'm writing a software to send an email. I can put anything in that from in the name of the sender, right? Nothing stops me from writing anything in the email header which makes you believe that it is come from, let us say, PMO, Prime Minister's office, or from a lottery, big lottery somewhere, or from any important personality that you revere and praise. So that repudiation, all of this are risk. We don't understand this because we have got email clients and email browsers which already protect us from this. But an attacker does not have to depend upon a Outlook or a Thunderbird or a email or a mobile client. He can write his own client and send his own packet, which may have anything, right? So these are the typical threats that you have to email. So what are the options? The options is, first of all, to secure the data which is in transit, right? And then the other is to end-to-end delivery, which is end-to-end encryption. Now end-to-end encryption these days is very popular, especially in terms of IMs, instant messengers, which is the WhatsApp, the Telegrams, the Signals. So what does end-to-end does is, whenever I send a message, it is encrypted from my device, and then it is only decrypted at the other receiver's device. So nobody in between, not even the companies which are hosting those services, can see. At least that is what a true end-to-end means, and that is what they all claim, right? So what happens is, nobody in between, no matter how much control you have on the infrastructure or link, or how much data you have in the middle, you will be able to do anything because the data is end-to-end encrypted. So PGP is a solution, an open source solution, which allows you to do that end to end, right? It allows you to encrypt files, any files, and then attach it into an email and send it across. So even though the email may get compromised, but the file is encrypted using PGP. Even though the email is sent from somebody unknown, but if the file is encrypted using PGP, you will know that whether the actual sender it sent it or an imposter is send it, right? Now these emails security softwares, which are typically based on PGP, some of the email security softwares are available which are not PGP based, but PGP is the most common open source protocol which is used. They have been in place for years now. Phil Zimmerman created it in, let us say, 2003, 4, 5, and still, even after so many years, it is not as common, because one important reason is that email is used by everybody, right? Not very tech savvy people, normal people, people who are not very aware with the technology, and then for them it becomes difficult because PGP has a little bit of overhead where you have to actually manage the keys that we were discussing in the last session, private key, public key, and then you will have to share those keys to establish the identity or the identity ring of trust. So all these problems make it a little difficult, but all the more if you have data which is confidential and which needs to be protected, PGP should be used, right? I mean, these are the reasons why people don't use PGP. Many of you would be aware because it is little difficult. And then you have, PGP. The important portion about PGP is that it is an open source, right? And it has been converted into a IFT standard, which is again RFC. RFC is 2440, right? The advantage of this is anybody who wants to write a software can use PGP. The risk is anybody can write a software saying that it is based on PGP, but actually not implementing all the provisions of PGP and thus delivering users an inferior product. That is the most common problem with PGP is if you go to any site and a lot of hundreds of sites will say that they provide you a PGP software where you can encrypt your files, send it over email and then decrypt it. But then you have to be sure that you download it from a right source, because that can be a attacker sharing you a software free, but it is not doing actually what it is supposed to do. It might also send a copy to the attacker, right? Or it might create a backdoor in the encryption which can be broken by the attacker, right? So always remember to download it from trusted sources, preferably the people who are actually maintaining the PGP code on the open source, right? So PGP is an email security program which was written by Phil Zimmermann. It's based on, again, the algorithms are the same. The basic of security on internet is encryption, so it has to use some kind of an encryption. So it uses IDA algorithm and then RSA for public and private key. Okay, I haven't touched upon this. I'm sure some people would have, but I would still like to touch upon this very important point. Is there are two kinds of crypto system. One is symmetric key crypto system. The other is asymmetric key or public key crypto system. Now there are a lot of differences. The major difference is the shared key or public and private key pair, right? In symmetric key crypto system, there is only one key which is used to encrypt as well as decrypt. So you can imagine it to be like a normal two key lock. The lock is the same. So let us say I have one key and I share it with my friend. I have two keys, so I keep one key with myself and give the second key to my friend, right? And then I log that box with my key or that same key and it send it across through any media to my friend. He uses the same copy of the same key to decrypt it, right? That is an example of a symmetric key. So although the lock is same, the key is same, but the key is shared. Now the problem with this kind of mechanism is sharing of the key online. In case of locks, you have to share that key offline. I meet my friend in a cafe or a restaurant, I give him the keys and then I know that nobody else has handled it. But suppose you send that key in an envelope, right, over post. So if the attacker is monitoring the post of your house, he will open that envelope, get the key, create a copy and send that key back to my friend. And whenever that I send a box which is locked with that key, he will in between open it up, see the contents, copy it, replicate it, change it, whatever his intentions is, and again close it with the same key and let it go. And my friend will feel that he has received a safe box and the contents are same. So this is the problem with a symmetric key crypto system, because the key has to be shared. So problem one is sharing of the key. So if you do it offline, it becomes a logistic nightmare. But if you do it online, then the security can very well be compromised without the users involved being aware that it has been compromised. So then comes the crypto system PKI, right? Public key. What it happens is it has public private key pairs. One you can encrypt with one and it can decrypt with the other. So it is always like that. You can never encrypt with the private key and decrypt with the private key again. It has to always be decrypted by a public key. And the other way around, somebody encrypts it with your public key, so only your private key can decrypt it, right? So but it looks to be a very good system, but the problem is the amount of computation required, right? The key pairs, the prime numbers, the factorization of the prime numbers and maintenance and all of these things. So what happens is if you have a lot of data, then this asymmetric crypto public private key crypto system will not be able to deliver data in real time at that rate that you want to, because it is a lot of overhead in encryption and decryption. Symmetric key is easy and quick on encryption decryption, but the problem is with sharing of keys, right? So what do? We create a system which is a mix of both. Now, how do we do that? We create a shared key, right? That shared key will be used to actually encrypt data, right? But then we use the PKI, the private and public key, to actually encrypt that shared key, right? It's actually a pretty smart system. So you create a private key and then encrypt data, actual data, with that private key, and then you encrypt that private key with the public private key pair, the public infrastructure, and send it across to your friend or the other person who has to receive it. So then he uses his private key to decrypt that private key, that shared key, symmetric key, and then use that symmetric key to decrypt the data. So it's at the 2 level, right? Does that make sense? Because it's a very powerful idea. You leverage the speed and performance and security of a symmetric key system, and you leverage the complexity and uh, key sharing mechanism of the public key, and you use both of them to actually form a hybrid crypto system, right? So this is what happens. The idea is a symmetric key algorithm which is actually used to encrypt data, whereas RSA is a public key algorithm which is actually used to encrypt the keys with the keys of IDA algorithm. Right? Okay, so it's a freely available system, and then there are a lot of services that are available. You can only sign it. So in PGP there is a where you can actually only sign it. The data will be visible to anybody who interrupts, but he will not be able to change any contents, because as soon as he change any contents, the receiver will know that the packet or the data has been tampered, and it is not coming from the original sender addresses. Then you can also encrypt the messages and do both. In that case, you will have encryption as well as authentication that it's coming from the right source. You can compress it to save space. You can segment it to keep the packet size small. All of these are available in PGP, right? Again, as I've told you, it's an open source software and an open source protocol. So fake PGPs are aware. You have to be very careful. Once you share your keys and all those things with the fake software, then your complete security ecosystem can get compromised, right? So it uses symmetric key. You can use DES, 3DES, AES, IDEA, whatever you want. You can use public key for sharing symmetric keys, which is RSA, LGML, or any other RSA or public key systems, hashing and signature for digital signature and integrity, right? So all of this is a lot of details which we do not unfortunately have time for, right? There are a lot of attacks also, but there are ways to encrypt it. So that is all I had to talk about PGP, and my time unfortunately is up. So if you have any questions, we can take it now immediately. Otherwise, what I'll do is I'll share my email address. Okay, there's another question on VPN. I'll just take it. So all attendees, right? So I've sent my email address. If you have any questions on VPN, IPsec, PGP, or any other, for that matter, any other security, or how does NIC do things? I mean, the technology is all available in the market. How are we actually leveraging it to protect the government data? If you have questions regarding that, or you have a use case or a problem that you have and you want to resolve, you can always get in touch with me over this email, and I'm sure we will be able to find some way out. Now there's a question which says, which is the best VPN at home, at work? So then there are two uses of VPN, as I have discussed. So let me reiterate it. One is you have to access your secure enterprise data, right? In that case, the VPN will be provided by the enterprise, the organization you are working with, so you don't have to worry. The second use case, probably for which you are asking the question, is when you have to break the censorship, or when you have to surf web anonymously. There are a lot of VPNs available, and many of them are good, but from a security paranoid, which is me, any VPN that is not run by you, they will always record, right, whatever you do. So although your browsing history and everything will be safe from the rest of the world, but if that VPN vendor wants, he can sell your data. If there is a court order, or there is any government requirement, he can always share. But then, as far as I know, none of the VPN vendors in the world do this absolutely securely. They always keep some data, your connecting IP, your browsing history, and they will any point of some sell it due to money, some keep it for law enforcement, some keep it for analytics, but your data will always be there with the provider. So the best VPN, if you are a little tech savvy, is you take a cloud wherever you want on some cloud service provider, and then host your own OpenVPN or a WireGuard server there. That will be the safest way. But of course, if you're not that tech savvy and you don't have time and resources to do all these things, you can buy any of the VPNs that are available. Prefer a paid VPN. Proton VPN seems to be one of the good ones. Again, I'm saying that it will not be 100% safe, and it will give data to someone or the other. Let us say Switzerland, because it's hosted in Switzerland, so Switzerland government or even US government. But still, it is for a normal use case, it will help you. But there are other VPNs which you can explore. I hope that answers. If you have any other question, just feel free. Yes, NordVPN is also good. NordVPN is also good, but of course prefer the paid versions, because at least in that case they will feel some obligation to not share your data. But in today's world, we know even if you pay, with the attacks like CryptoAG, people used to buy their equipment, CryptoAG encryptors, and even then their data used to get compromised. So yes, for normal home users with no specific security paranoia and security paranoia, is NordVPN or Proton VPN, they're all they're good, not a problem. Any other questions? Okay, so since we are running anyway 5 years over the time, so I'll take your leave and thank you so much. I hope I could add a little value to what you are understanding. And you have my email address, hasan@gov.in, so feel free to contact me for any case of technical as well as use case requirements. Over to the presenters. Thank you.
Thank you, Hassanji. It was a very interesting, very informative lecture. Yeah, thank you very much for the expertise.